Hi everyone. I did my AAER project on computer science corporations, and I just want to start out with a little background on the company. So they were founded in 1958 in LA, California. They provide software programming services to companies like IBM, Honeywell, NASA. They do a lot of government contracting. So they were the largest software company in the U.S. by 1963. And they started trading in the New York Stock Exchange in 1968. By this time, they're already operating in 9+ countries. Today, they're in about 70, a little more than 70 countries, I believe. And they've been a Fortune 500 company since 1995. They provide major IT services for the federal government, law enforcement agencies, and intelligence agencies, and also, like I said, NASA for aeronautics and aerospace. And as recent as 2012, their U.S. federal contracts accounted for 36% of their total revenue. And last year, they merged with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise to form DXC Technologies. So before I get into the actual fraud, I just wanted to give you a little insight about who the main perpetrators are. So you have Michael Laffin. Just a little background on him. He served in the U.S. Air Force and Pennsylvania Air National Guard. He went to Penn State and got his BBA in accounting, like us. He attended graduate school at UPenn and got to get his MBA. He had been at the company for 35 years before becoming CEO for the last 5, when he was forced out after the fraud. Michael Mancuso, he's the CFO. Couldn't really find much on this guy. A little bit about his working experience. He was 21 years at GE, and I was actually the CFO there as well before becoming CFO of CSC. And then Robert Sutcliffe, he's a little bit of a lower end, not an executive, but he still had a significant role. So he studied accounting and finance at Manchester University. He's from the UK, and he was their finance director for the computer science corporations of the National Health Services contract. And he was fired in 2013 after conclusion of the SEC investigation. Okay, so a little bit about what the fraud was over. So they CSC entered into a contract with the UK's National Health Services because the NHS wanted to build and deploy an electronic patient record system. So the contract had the potential to earn CSC $5.4 billion in revenue if they could meet all their contracted debt timelines. So for this, CSC would earn the revenue under the contract to the extent that it delivered its products and services on time. And the volume specified in the contract deployment plan. So they had to meet a certain amount, this certain milestone for this much of the patient records type thing. But CSC in 2008 started to have trouble developing the software, and never disclosed this to any of its investors, and just portrayed that it was meeting all of its milestones and everything. So they entered back into contract renegotiation with NHS, and they restructured the contract to do away with a clause that had penalties for every milestone that they missed. So they would have had to pay $160,000 per missed milestone, which was supposed to be an incentive to help them to not miss those, but it actually backfired, and they started missing too many. So they restructured it so that they would be able to get away with those penalties. Okay, so they had these percentage of completion models, which was how they would record revenue and also value the contract. So under GAAP, it requires a company using the percentage of completion accounting to revise their estimates of any expected costs and revenues continually as their work progresses by using just models. So CSC's practices was to update its accounting model for every March and September to evaluate the contract. And if a company's accounting model reflects that the contract will result in a significant loss in a period, GAAP requires that company to record the entire anticipated loss in that period. And then if a contract becomes unprofitable, the work in process asset may be reduced or wholly partially unrecoverable, prompting a write-down in the value of assets. And this is where CSC ran into a lot of trouble because they weren't doing this properly. So in 2009, Robert Sutcliffe, the man I mentioned earlier, the finance director of the NHS account in England, he prepared an accounting model that reflected NHS contract would generate a significant loss, but he didn't really relay that to the CEO or CFO at the time when this was first generated. So prior models had all suggested that the profit margin would be forecasted for about 16% on this contract, but since obviously that didn't happen, CSC was about to fall $1 billion short of their original $5.4 billion estimate for revenue from the contract. So to try and change this, Sutcliffe and his team for the NHS account, they basically inserted millions of dollars of revenue associated with products that they weren't actually selling to the NHS, and that they had actually stopped developing and producing altogether. But they put $1 million of revenue sales into the contract that they had that NHS had not, that they weren't going to buy. Like, they had no intention of buying these, but Sutcliffe used these numbers anyway. And then to close the remaining 16% margin gap, he assumed in the model that NHS would agree to future price increases to maintain CSC's profit margin. And by the letter of the contract, there was no reason to believe that NHS would agree to such terms, and the prices that he was using were ridiculously high just to meet the 16%. This is an obvious violation of GAAP, so there was no factual support of any kind to assume the price increase, and this is all just an artificial way to pad the numbers for him. So if in a couple of reports I found, there was plenty of former